If there was one fresh custody case that deterred us from being a fresh custody, then just look at a recent case from here at Newcastle Local Court. Suddenly being in custody can be a great disruptor to your free and fancy lifestyle and therefore a deterrence. Here's an example of how disruptive suddenly being in custody can be. There's a guy who I'll call Steve, it's not his real name. Steve, who's probably in his 30s, has a criminal history. He's been on multiple intensive correction orders for driving and community correction orders for offences against the police, but he's never been in jail. Steve was arrested the day before where police refused bail and therefore appears the next day at Newcastle as a fresh custody. It's a show cause fresh custody as the police are alleging Steve offended while subject to an outstanding warrant. So Steve, via his solicitor, has the burden of arguing why he should not be detained. So this is where we hear details of Steve's life that are being impacted on by he being currently police bail refused. Steve has been sorting out some personal issues to the point that he really needs to be bailed so he can sign important paperwork the next day. First, he has experienced unstable accommodation. However, Steve is due to sign a lease tomorrow with a real estate agent. Second, he's been working on restoring his relationship with his young son, who is currently in care. He is about to start the next step in the process of restoring the relationship by signing paperwork tomorrow. In addition, his young son has cancer, and so there is a need to support him through his treatment. By the way, in case you think this is some made-up story, it's validated by paperwork. Regardless of whether you think that any of this is true, we've all had days where there's some critical thing that we really need to do. Well, for Steve, it's tomorrow. In my opinion, they argue a very strong, persuasive case for bail to be granted. The magistrate accepts the need to support the son. Remember, he is police bail refused, and this appearance is all about if the court will grant bail or not. By the way, we haven't heard what Steve is accused of yet, but wait, because the police prosecutor is about to speak. The police prosecutor is opposing Steve's bail application and reminds the court of the bail concerns. The prosecutor argues that their case against Steve is strong because the two recent charges of police assault and intimidation were witnessed by other police officers. Also, the prosecution is arguing that there is a risk of Steve failing to appear at court because he has had warrants in the past for failing to appear. I think when the prosecution describes the series of events leading up to today, they give a strong, persuasive case for bail to be refused. Story goes, Steve is accused of allegedly assaulting his ex-partner and her cousin at 3:30 a.m. on New Year's Day. Also, there's an AVO in place to protect the ex-partner with only two conditions. The standard condition, do not assault, threaten and stalk, as well as the condition not to go to her residence, so he can still be around her. Fast forward from New Year's Day to yesterday. Steve's ex-partner is in his presence when the police arrest him, but he isn't breaching the AVO because he isn't at her house. They're at a hotel. Police allegedly find Steve hiding in a wardrobe in this hotel room, and he is completely naked. So he is arrested, and it's when the police attempt to put naked Steve into the caged police vehicle, he allegedly kicks one of the police officers in the chest and threatens to kill them. I suspect there's a bit more of the story, but it wasn't said out loud. Remember, the magistrate has all the paperwork in front of them, and I felt the gallery had enough details. By the way, I'm the only one in the gallery. So we hear a strong, persuasive argument for bail to be granted. Steve's got places to be tomorrow and important life stuff happening. But the police make a strong, persuasive argument to refuse bail based on risks. At this stage, Steve has his cuffed hands together and he's praying. The two correctional officers who lead him into the dock look like they're preparing for Steve's reaction. If bail is refused, they will need to get him out of the dock and back down into the cells. Remember, we've just heard about the full kick to the police officer's chest that allegedly occurred yesterday. So as the magistrate gives their reasons, Steve prays harder. Being held in custody is going to impact on his plans and disrupt his life. We could ask, but for the kick to the police officer's chest, would Steve have been in the dock praying as he waits for the court's decision? The correctional officers are ready as the magistrate makes the decision. Bail is refused. Steve is swiftly removed from the dock. Even with the door closed, you can hear him yelling as he descends back to the cells below the courtroom. I don't know what you've got going on in your life and where you need to be tomorrow, but being a fresh custody is possibly going to disrupt your life.